All right, well, regardless of how we all got here today, I appreciate that you all took the time to join us. It is such an amazing, iconic show. And we were talking a little bit earlier about the early days of the show and what you expected the show to be. So, Kelly, I guess we'll start with you. When you did the pilot, or when they at least approached you with the project, what was the idea you had in your head of what this show was going to be, and how different was it from what it really became?
Well, I was an assistant on the pilot. So the pilot was cut by Lynn Willingham, and I was assisting her. And she said, she came in, we were working on a different show for CBS, and she came in the office that day, and she said, she closed the door, and I said, why are you closing the door? And she's like, I got a pilot. I'm like, you're not going to do it anyway. She goes, no, I'm going to do it. I'm like, really? And I said, what is it? And she said, it's Vince Gilligan. And I'm like, yes, let's go. I can't wait, And I had no idea what it was. And so then she let me read it. And it was, sort of, I always thought it was sort of this madcap thing.
You're editing a project like this. How far out are you aware of what the story arc is? I mean, and do you need that kind of information to better inform the cuts you're doing in that episode?
We don't know.
We don't know.
We don't.
No, we basically have the script we're working with.
So it's really episode to episode.
For us, it was, yeah. We would be lucky enough to get, in later years, we'd start to get outlines, which were really, really great because they wrote them like little short stories. They were about 8 pages, and they wrote out the whole thing in sort of a narrative form, and it was way fun to read those. And so maybe we would know maybe an episode or 2 ahead. The hard part, though, and this is a good testament for Skip, because the hard part would be if he was working on an episode, didn't have time to read his next outline, and we would know what was going on, and we're like, oh my God, we couldn't talk about it. Yeah. So we don't want to spoil it.
Have you read it yet? Have you read it yet?
Yeah, constantly.
No, you've got to read it.
But I would
Go home and take time out and just read it.
I would refuse, remember?
No, I didn't.
Yeah, Sherry never read them.
Oh,
No.
that was,
Because I wanted to know.
oh my God. I did
With
not
the
know that.
audience.
So it was really unfolding for you guys, just like it was for the audience at home. Obviously, you're a little bit ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah, sort of. I mean, that was the only joy that we could take really from it.
Yeah.
Was getting to read the outlines on it. We didn't get to enjoy it like fans enjoyed it at all.
But that was our being the fan ourselves.
Yeah.
Our outlines were our.
I mean,
viewing of the
most
of
shows
the
that I've
episodes.
ever seen, you don't get the outlines, and not many people read them. Or I'm not an editorial. I've never seen that before.
Okay, so before we dig in any further on like the overall arc of the show, we probably should give people a good idea of what the setup was editorially, because there are teams in place and there are, how you divided up the shows. So Skip, maybe you walk us through like who, the assistants and the editors.
The assistants and the editors. Well, we had 4 Avids through a Unity. We all had our own systems, and basically we would rotate every other episode, cutting-wise, and the assistants would get us prepped up and ready to go, and as always, we would like them to cut scenes throughout the episodes when they have time.
Okay. And Sherry was your assistant.
Was my assistant.
Chris is Kelly's assistant.
Yes.
Was it through the run of the show that you were always working together and you two were always working?
No.
No.
I came on season 2.
I actually came on in the last season. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, and that was when we actually had a 3-2 setup.
Yeah.
So it was Skip, Kelly,
That's right.
and Lynn Willingham.
Lynn Willingham cut the pilot, and then she cut the pilot, and I was assisting her. Then when the show got picked up, she cut the first episode. I started cutting the second episode. We hired some new assistants. Then at about show number 4, we brought Skip on because the schedule was just too much. And so then Skip was the 3rd editor, and we had 3 editors, 2 assistants. And then the second season, the writer's strike hit. So we had to stop. And then in the second season, we had Lynn, me, and Skip, and then we hired Sheridan to be...
And Mel Friedman.
And Mel
was
Friedman,
my
who was
other
another...
assistant.
Yeah, he assisted us up until season 5B.
Okay.
And then he decided to retire, just out of the blue. He calls me up and he says, I think I'm going to retire. What? He's like the biggest fan, the biggest Breaking Bad fan ever. And I was like, Mel, there's only 8 more to go. How can you retire? And he's like, I think I just want to like enjoy the last 8 as a fan. So I was working with Chris on another show at the time, and so I said, "Hey, guess what? Would you like to come come work on Breaking Bad?"
And Chris said, "Nah." I don't
He said, "I'll think
Wow.
about it."
No, I said well, because I was a huge fan of the show too, and my thought process was because we'd been working together at that time, and going into it, she said, "I can't bring you to Breaking Bad. I know, it's don't even think about it. Don't get your hopes up."
Ouch.
And but then when she called and said, "All right, are you in?" I did have to think about it because I thought I'm not going to get to watch the last 8 episodes, where this show ultimately is going. I don't get to watch it, and about 3 seconds later, I thought, "Oh, what are you talking about? Are you crazy?"
Yeah.
Yeah, so I said
I don't
absolutely.
remember this at all. It
Yeah.
was so funny. He's like, he told me that a
was a
couple
phone
weeks
call.
ago, and I'm like, "What? You said you had to think about it?" Wow, I didn't remember.
What is, you hear this all the time from people. It's like, how do I move up from assistant to editor? And in gaining that trust of the editor to actually be given scenes to cut and then eventually, larger pieces, if not a whole show to cut. How was that process for you guys? How did you get, Skip and Kelly to help you?
Well, I did a bunch of different things over the years, like the Better Call Saul commercial, which we always talk about. You are under arrest, all that kind of fun stuff. A lot of the commercials, like the Pollos Hermanos. So I did a bunch of different little things, and then
Just cut scenes.
cut scenes.
Yeah, you just give them
cut
scenes to
scenes.
cut, and then you start giving them notes. It's funny because as an editor, it's kind of a learning process for you to start to learn to sit on the couch and give notes, rather than say, "Just get up and let me do it." So it's like, you give. I mean, that's how we all learned as well. I mean, we were all assistants as well, and so we learned by having the editor give us scenes. When I worked for Lynn Willingham, who got the pilot, before I started working on Breaking Bad, I was cutting, whole acts of a show, because you have to start to build up, you have to start to build up your stamina and build up, how you're gonna work on this and how you're gonna juggle your assistant duties as well. There's a lot more that the assistants are responsible for nowadays because of the computer and because there's so much more work that they can do. Like when we were cutting on film, you couldn't really do much. I mean, there's only 2 tracks, maybe 4, unless you pre-mix, and so there's not a whole lot. Now, have them color the show and do all the effects, and no, I'm just kidding.
And the workload for the assistants is much bigger now with the digital age too, because there's so much more work to get the dailies in, and sometimes they take them from the camera masters.
There's so many more dailies too.
Yeah.
Oh my God, there's so many more dailies now. It's like you used to be getting a couple hours. Now you're getting 6 to 10 hours a day. It's like you can't even watch them.
Which on TV, there's so little time.
Right.
You have to cut so quickly. It's not, on a feature, we've all worked on features, and there's a luxury of time, although you never feel like you have any time. But there's really no time on TV. So you have to sift through 8 hours of dailies in a day, and you really have to kind of get it all cut in the next day or 2.
So what was the runtime of each? Was it like 40 minutes?
47.
47?
47, 07, 04. Yeah.
Drop frame.
You'll never forget those numbers.
Drop frame, a completely meaningless.
Yeah. No, that was,
So how many hours of footage would they shoot for an episode to eventually boil it down to 47 minutes?
They started to get competitive too.
Yeah.
It's at first it was maybe 24 to 30. Then it started to run up to 30 to 36.
Yeah, and then it got up into the 40s.
Then it got up in the 40s. I actually had one that was 56 hours or something on.
And this is shooting on film.
No, this was not. The 56 was not.
We shot on film the entire run.
We shot on film, 35 3-per for the entire run of Breaking Bad. Just a couple of things were done digitally, but very few.
Was there anything that changed over the 5 seasons in terms of your production process or how you shared the workload?
We actually were on SD up until season 4.
Until season 4, yeah.
And then the whole kind of change, we went from being the show that nobody knew to being top secret. You're more top secret than Spider-Man.
Yeah,
we had a code name.
We couldn't
all
have
this
people
kind of
in for lunch. We couldn't have visitors.
And
All the
so from
correspondents
there,
said Delphi, because that was on the. Oh no, they've given it. It's out there. It's public now.
It's public knowledge.
It's public information. Yeah, because the writer's office, which was downstairs from the editing room, in this
In a super
very
secret
interesting building
in Burbank.
In Burbank.
In a nondescriptive building in Burbank.
Really
it was really
It was a building with character. It was a real fixer-upper. That building. And I guess the tenants before Breaking Bad moved in there was called the Delphi Information Services Corporation.
Yeah, it was weird. There was the sign on the door.
Sciences, that's it.
And they just
Information
kept the
Sciences.
sign. It was like so funny. They just kept the sign the whole way.
That's
So-
perfect.
And the
Yeah.
editing
And then it got
room had no
stolen.
sign.
Yeah.
The sign got stolen.
Yeah, somewhere in that last season, the sign
That
got
was
stolen.
weird
Yeah.
that sign got stolen, yeah.
And so then it went from SD right away to HD and super secret. So everything watermarked,
Yeah.
everybody individual name,
No more DVDs would
everything
go out.
redacted. Like the
Yeah,
scripts would be
we had
redacted.
redacted scripts. We had redacted outlines. When
Yeah.
we would get an outline that was redacted, like your outline comes and your name is like watermarked on it, right? But then it would be redacted, and we'd call downstairs to the post-production office. We'd say, "Well, how do we read it? Oh, you have to come down here.
Yeah.
We'd
We
have
have
to
one
trek
copy,
down there.
one
Yeah.
copy
you
Like
can-
a library.
Go down
had to
there and
check
print
out.
it and
Is there
Microfiche.
read it.
ever been any other show you've worked on even remotely like that?
Nothing. Not me.
Better Call Saul.
Yeah, Better Call Saul is like
Better
that.
Call Saul is like that. I can see why Better Call Saul is like that. And is that wrapped yet, or you're halfway through it, or
We're not even halfway.
not even halfway? So
No,
how
I
many
don't think, are
episodes?
we?
Was it 4?
You're working on the
10
halfway
10
mark.
the
right
halfway
now.
mark,
It just started. Like the halfway
Yeah,
mark
we're
just
about
started shooting.
almost halfway.
What do you look for in an assistant editor? What makes an assistant editor a great assistant?
Nowadays, they need to have a lot of technical experience because they've got to be able to keep the Avids going, and all the different formats of things, and now stuff has to go out digitally, so they need to know all the specs for all the different departments and stuff, and people who can organize, but people who are also willing or have the drive to want to cut stuff.
So you rely on Sherry and Chris to really be on top of things technically, know what's the new things, and,
Yeah.
and keep you informed.
Yeah, because
Okay.
now, when you have to send stuff out to the sound effects people and the composer, they all have different specs. And I couldn't tell you what those are.
Yeah.
And even if they told me what they were, I couldn't find out how to set it up.
We don't tell them.
Yeah, you know what? It's funny too how fast you want to forget that stuff once you move up to editor. It's true. I feel like I am a total testament to that because I was a really, really great assistant.
Yeah, you were
and
a
you
real
know
techie,
what?
too. You were really
I
tech
could
savvy.
like hack through the machine. I could like do the hardware, all of
Build
it.
your own computer.
I
Yeah.
could.
That's crazy.
I could.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
I could. I mean, because I came up with editors who expected that. Like I came up, like my first job, we didn't even have Avid yet, or any of the other. We had a computerized system, but it was like way in the old days. And I was like, my editor wanted me to be able to like wire the thing and wire
Yeah.
a
We had
mixer
to do
and
all
all that
that
kind of
stuff,
stuff.
yeah.
So
Cable.
yeah, we had to cable it up and everything. We wanted to know that. I like when assistants know that stuff, but it was like when I would work as an assistant and like I had worked for an editor who had just moved up, I would be like, how do they not know this stuff? They just did it like last month. But you do forget.
You know what it
forget.
is? It's different modes.
Quick,
Yeah.
you forget
And
it.
when you assist and cut at the same time, and you have to switch the modes, like I used to be able to do it really fast.
Me
and
too.
now, but it's that different kind of mode that you get into. There's
Mm-hmm.
just, there's the decision-making, performance-making mode of editing,
Mm-hmm.
and then there's the technical, how am I going to get it from in to out?
Because Sheridan just moved up as well. I mean, she's cutting now on for a show. What's your show?
Kingdom for DirecTV.
Yeah, she's cutting now, and so you had to hire. That's the hardest part too. Is telling assistants when they move up. You know what? You're gonna have to find you, and it's really hard to find you. I mean, it is.
Well, you know what? What's happening now, like getting back to the mentorship program, I think it's working very well for the editing end. That's kind of the easiest end to like mentor. It's the assistant and the apprentice and all that, because there's, to get good assistants, it's getting fewer and fewer and fewer, because just people have been raised on Final Cut Pro, so there's certain things they do there.
They don't know how to. They don't know how to work. They don't understand the workflow of a professional.
Yeah,
cutter.
what is
Exactly.
So I'm sure all of you are approached all the time by film students or up-and-comers. I mean, when you all started out to this mentorship, process really was necessary. And film school, things like getting your hands on the equipment was difficult. Now anybody can go to the App Store or subscribe to Media Composer, and they've got it already.
Right.
There's not that hurdle of like, I've got to get in somewhere where I can get my hands on the equipment.
Well, it's weird because people think that automatically because they have a system, they know how to cut or they know how to assist.
Yeah.
And, just because you have a camera, you're not Ansel Adams. Just because you play trumpet, you're not Miles Davis. People think because they have access to that equipment that they know how to use the equipment in a professional
What
manner.
is it that they're missing? What is that special sauce of working in professional?
Training. There's
Yeah.
nobody to train them. They try to train themselves, and they think,
And a willingness to learn.
Yeah.
Like to
And to
step
work
back.
really, really hard.
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, if
Yeah.
you look at any successful person, I mean, I think that the common thread is always going to be a willingness to work harder than anybody else that is around them.
And it is hard work. These guys, sometimes, it depends on the show, but sometimes the assistants are doing so much, and it's expected that, I'm like sitting here going, wait a minute, they shouldn't be doing that. They should hire, but
Post house.
yeah.
Essentially.
Or sound
Sound work
editors.
too. There's a lot of sound
Sound
work.
work.
Because which some of that is sort of essential because a lot of things don't play unless the sound is working in concert with the picture, and so there is work that you do just to make stuff live, but there sometimes there's an expectation of like almost a finished mix. And sometimes the work that you do goes to the finished mix.
No, there is an expectation. There
interesting.
definitely is an expectation for that.
Yeah.
But the thing is that, you'll get it. You can take classes and learn how the specifics work, but you're never going to really know until you get in the cutting room and you're just thrown because you're just always throwing loops in the cutting room. You're just always
like Chris
thrown.
said, the apprenticeship program in television is gone. And that should have never happened.
Well, it used to be in the film days, you would just do one task, like trim tabs, and then you would graduate to the next task.
Yeah,
But
all
it
that
was
kind of
pop
stuff.
learning how
Tracks.
things worked in the cutting room.
Right.
Now there isn't that experience
Yeah.
for
Well,
people.
you're even using conventions that aren't so much around anymore. I mean, one of the things about Media Composers has been around so long that when it started 25 years ago, people were cutting film, cutting tape, and you had to use concepts like bins and trim to help people move along.
Yes.
And now that that's sort of gone away, is there a disconnect? Now, does it make it hard?
It
What am I trying to say here?
hasn't gone away because
That's hard for me to answer.
Because basically, you have to be able to, if you're not around, somebody's got to be able to look at a project and know where everything is.
Yeah.
So that's organization. That's doing something with a workflow, getting to know your editor's workflow, what they like, that kind of thing, and what you need in order to produce the output, to the outcome. I mean, it's all garbage in, garbage out. It's the same thing.
It's
So
idiot-proofing things.
It's idiot-proofing.
Which is why, I mean, Avid is really functional as far as that. It's essential because you can just go right into a project, and if you've organized it, correctly, like you said, anybody could just drop right. If you just died, if everybody disappeared, if it was like The Leftovers,
Yeah.
and we just boom, 8%, right, 2%. However many people just disappeared. If everybody from editorial happened to be the people who just got raptured,
Imagine that.
yeah, you could just bring in some of those leftovers, and once they got over the sadness of losing everybody that they knew, they could continue cutting that project, and because you'd need entertainment in that.
Well, yeah, with all the editors gone, there'd be
Yeah.
nobody to talk to. And
Yeah.
Did Damon call you last night?
Yeah, I'm actually out of here.
Oh, okay. Got
An
it.
announcement today.
But what I always tell assistants when they're kind of learning is do everything in a rhythm. Because if you do things in the same workflow, in the same rhythm, you can tell when something's off. If you're always doing something different, and that's something, when you're doing it by yourself, you might do it one way or organize another way because you know your own head and what you're doing that time, that kind of thing. But if you get into a way you do dailies each morning, the way you check the paperwork, everything like that, then you can know, wait a minute, I'm missing this take. But if you do it kind of haphazard and do it a different way every time, you're never going to know when there's a mistake.
One thing I want to throw in there too is that I mean, we all come, I think maybe with the exception of Chris, we're all coming from a film background.
I worked on film.
Would you? Okay, sorry.
Michael Mann.
Sorry.
No, there was no film there, but the first movie I worked on was a John Sayles movie.
But what I was going to say was that...
Were you chems or?
600 years ago. 600 years ago. I'm a vampire. I'm an undead vampire.
What I was going to say, though, is that we're all coming from a film background where, and, you know, when you assist on film, I mean, first of all, there was a workflow, and all that paperwork was there for a reason. It's still there for a reason. But a lot of times now, assistants, I'm finding newer assistants don't really know why there is that paperwork and why there is that workflow.
Well, and there was a standardization.
Right.
Like if you looked at your library, picture was black. Sound was in red.
Yeah.
Because you could go into any cutting room and know where everything is.
Yeah.
You know where the work picture is.
But the thing that I was going to mention was that, like, okay, it was very, very production driven. It's like, okay, the camera reports you'll get and the sound reports you'll get, and you'll get the script supervisor's notes. Those things have to be cross-referenced, and you'll see the circle takes or whatever. Well, what happens when there's a discrepancy? Well, I was always taught the script supervisor is the Bible.
Yeah.
I don't know if assistants are taught that anymore, but that was the thing. So if there was ever a discrepancy between picture and sound, or there's not enough takes, what does the script supervisor say? Okay, then you got to get on the phone and order that from the lab. It may not come till tomorrow or whatever, but you got to get on the phone and order it. The other thing that I found that's like, okay, you can walk into a cutting room, now and say, hey, how much dailies do I have, right? And the assistant's like, well, we don't have it all, so I don't know.
Yeah.
And it's like, I'm sorry, you could sit there and take the reports and do the math. That's what you used to have to do as a first assistant. And Skip was a first assistant for a lot of years. I actually interviewed with him for a job like way, way back on a Jodie Foster picture, right?
I hope you got it.
I didn't get that job.
Yeah.
But that's okay.
Final
But you know what?
decision.
Hey, this is the deal. All roads lead to here, don't they? All roads lead to here.
Yeah.
So, but the thing is that there is still that kind of paperwork being done. Yes, we may not be rolling film anymore, but you can still get the answers that you need. But most of the time, what I find, especially with newer assistants, is they're like, oh, I don't have it all yet. Or when things were coming on tape, they'd be like, they just look at the label. And it's like, no, I feel like I really wish that they would remember or learn how these things actually interconnected. Because when things, when you don't have those pieces of paperwork, it's important that you get them, And so I'm just finding that with the automation of so many things, it's kind of like, look, we want you to be, a good assistant, but you also need to know how to really help us if you don't have all these little, keys.
Well, it's critical thinking. It's like back in, reading comprehension.
Yeah.
They, as editors, we're not on the set. Your only link to the set is what the script supervisor gives you. That's the only, unless you're actually on the set. So that's what those squiggly lines mean. That's what those things mean.
A lot
they
of
actually
people
mean something.
Don't know why the script supervisor's notes look like what they look like. They don't understand, and these are things
How are they getting jobs? You think that's absolutely essential?
Well, because there's so many jobs out there, though. Nowadays, with all the cable stations and all of the online stuff, there is so much work out there, and there's a shortage of assistants.
Yeah.
I get called all the time now for great assistants. I don't know any that aren't working.
Yeah.
Like, I really don't know any that aren't working.
Yeah.
And I think that's where a training program needs to come back.
Yeah.
You'd be
To
surprised.
teach kids how to do it.
There are lots of people in editorial and in production who don't know what the purpose of a slate is.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, besides just to ID the
Tradition.
shot.
It's tradition. They just do it.
Well, they just do it, and they don't know.
It's so ceremonial.
Because we have,
exactly.
with sync time code, but it's not always right. And the metadata doesn't always match up. And so, when that happens, from your film training, you know how to pop tracks and how to sync them.
Yeah.
The other thing that I'm also finding
modulation.
with assistants, and I find it with editors too, and it's one of the things that I really work hard with Chris, and I know these guys work hard to do it as well. with assistants is what I'm finding is they don't get enough time just to spend in the room because they're so busy doing all of the other work that needs to get done. I mean, if they're not doing dailies, they're doing sound effects or doing visual effects or showing something to a producer, or they're doing all this other work. There's so much work for them to do in the few hours that they actually have on the clock, that they really don't have the chance to sit in the room and just be there while you're cutting. I don't need an assistant to sit there and while I'm cutting an editor's cut at all. But you know what? I try and make a point of having Chris come in when a director is there, or when producers are there, especially if he cut the scene. And you have to talk to the director and say, hey, my assistant did this part. Do you mind if he does the notes? And they have to be comfortable, because sometimes they're like, oh, well, I really don't have time, and why are you letting assistant do my work? I don't really run across that very much, and on Breaking Bad, definitely, everybody was very amenable to it. But you do have to get, you should ask their permission. But the thing is that I've always told Chris and any other editors or assistants that I'm working with, it's like, the thing is that nobody is going to see these guys as anything but that guy who works in the other room doing I don't know what, unless they're sitting and get a familiarity with them. I mean, I think that that's why I got to where I am. I'm obviously very talkative. I'm very easy to make friends with, right? But throughout my career, I've been one of those assistants. I've had editors who had me in the room. My first job as an assistant was on this little movie called A Home Video that was directed by Peter Horton. It was written by the 30-something guys, and it was basically the job that they got me on to get me into the union. It was a non-union gig that I got to get my days on. The editor was my mentor, Victor Dubois. And you know what? While Victor was cutting on the Ediflex, right? And that took, some time, and directors are sitting there like they want you to make a cut, but then they got to wait. Well, you know what? While he was waiting for Victor to, to do the magic that he was doing, I was playing Game Boy Golf with Peter, that was part of it. It was like, hey, and so he'd be like, okay, your turn. And that's,
It's just about relating to the people that you're working with.
Yes, and you know what? We still have a relationship today. I mean, that was like years ago. It's like a lot of these producers, when you get these assistants in the room, especially if you're not an editor who believes in you shouldn't be seen and not heard, that kind of thing. I've never believed in that, because that's how those assistants are going to make are going to have relationships, with these producer type of people. I mean, why else be an editorial aside from the cool work? It's you spend 10 hours a day sometimes with above the line people, and so it's like, of course they're gonna, Sheridan.
You were lucky.
Yeah, I
double Dutch row, kind of goes the other way.
But you know what? It's like I made the most of those opportunities. And I guess the thing that I'm trying to say is that I try and make sure that Chris comes in the room, even if he hasn't cut anything. I want him to be in the room just for a while, 2 hours or so, just so they get a familiarity with him. You know what I mean? So when all of a sudden, geez, you know what? I've got to go do something, and I'm not going to be here for 2 days. Oh, well, Chris can just step in. Great, Chris, yeah. If they don't have that familiarity, they're going to be like, well, gosh, who do we know? Who can we get on the phone with?
Yeah.
How do we find another editor? And that's the other thing. That's why we wanted to share credit with these guys. It's like these guys have ACE Award nominations now, And I mean, this is great it's great for their career, but it's not like we gave them to them. They did the work.
They have to do the work, and they earn it.
They did the work.
I
Spend a lot of money.
Yeah.
They did the work along with doing all of our assistant work too. I mean, they spend the time.
Yeah.
But like how you were talking about moving up, it's such a crapshoot, because there's been times that you're co-editing, pilot didn't get picked up. Yeah. That's been a lot of my career.
Yeah.
So some people can jump into the double Dutch rope and get there and start cutting and do it like that, and some people get hit in the face with it a lot, and that kind of thing. So you have to just be really good at your job. You have to be ready, as with everything. You do your outliers or whatever, your 10,000 hours of or more. Yeah,
So-
of stuff.
But you know
and then
what?
get
I will
going.
say for that double Dutch rope that Sheridan says she got bit in the face with, those producers still call her. They know her. They call her. She's one of the first calls they make.
So we
You
show up
know?
early and often and do the work.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Stop
and I mean,
skipping rope too. In the face.
in the face.
It's dangerous.
It's funny because
that on
like
ice skates?
with yes, figure skates always. But because of the nature of Breaking Bad, because of the two-editor rotation, usually you don't have time to breathe with a two-editor rotation, especially you're up against air dates. It's kind of impossible. It usually becomes 3-3. But the nature of Breaking Bad was we kind of basically did it over a time span like a feature.
It was very crazy,
Yeah.
the schedule that we were allowed to do.
Yeah, so it gave time. Like, Skip and I would always kind of like, he would cut his stuff, I would cut mine. We always like, okay, watch that, make sure, let's see what's going on. Yeah, we always would bounce stuff
Sit
off
down
of
and
each
watch
other.
them together and bounce stuff off of each other.
Yeah.
and,
Yeah, it was very much like
collaborative.
a partnership. And I remember the train.
The train.
Talk about like, it was all MOS.
Okay,
It
yeah,
was
there
like,
was no
there
train.
was no sound.
Sheridan did all that train.
Sheridan did the
And
phone
I
sound.
actually was working in a room between the two of them, and it was like all I heard. In fact, at one point I had to go home because I was like, okay, you guys, just let me know when you're finished doing that part of it, and I'll come back later and work because I think
you
I
were
was
in the
working
other
on some
room.
Yeah.
being in the
some
room.
really dramatic scene or something, right? Oh, you know
10
what it
minute long
was? No,
scene.
it was when they're dismembering the child that they shot in that episode.
You,
right?
got to watch this show.
I
See what you're missing out on?
They weren't dismembering the child, but symbolically when they were dismembering the bike, the motorbike.
motorbike.
And I was like, okay, you guys, I can't, I gotta, and I just had to.
Well,
leave,
when I was
think.
cutting the baby with Skylar Marie.
Yeah.
Oh,
Somebody
yeah.
pick that baby up.
Yeah,
I remember that.
please pick up the baby, please.
Pick up the baby.
Yeah, no, it was, yeah.
Well, I know a lot of people watching this wish they could have been in the cutting room with you guys. And one of the things people get excited about is we post pictures of like timelines of shows that they're familiar with. If we were in the cutting room with you looking at your Media Composer screen, what would the layout of your timeline look like? How many layers? I mean, what are the elements? How complicated is it?
I don't think ours was that complicated,
Well,
was it?
one thing
For the
that
most part.
our show was very different from a lot of shows, no temp music.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We did not
Unless
do
we were doing
any-
montage
Yes.
and something just
was actually written into the
written
script.
into the script about
But
it.
no temp composer tracks.
Mm-hmm.
We sent it to the studio basically with sound effects only. And so they didn't have any music notes. They didn't have anything to cloud them.
Or preconceived notions of what,
Of what?
it's gonna
of a
be,
temp
what it
piece
should
of
be.
music.
That wasn't working.
From something else.
At
Yeah.
some point, I remember Vince being in the cutting room and says, "Why should I tempt my show with like Batman when it's not going to be it's not going to be that." So, I believe that Vince was trained on the X-Files. That was his training ground. He talks about it a lot, and so. They didn't really do temp music there either, and that's kind of how he decided to run his editorial as well. He doesn't want to be distracted.
It gets
Also,
away
if-
from the story.
Yeah, and
you know?
if the scene doesn't play without music,
Yeah.
Why is it going to play?
Yeah.
Yeah, with music. But I mean, as far as timelines, I don't think we were ever over 8, maybe 10 audio tracks at any given time.
Yeah,
Yeah, maybe
it
the
didn't get that
shootout
complicated.
at the end.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I had like about 5 different gun
Guns
ricochets
sounds
And
to
the
go.
stuff going off.
Yeah, the chair.
Yeah, the massage chair.
the massage chair and
And
stuff.
generally not a lot of video channels either, because we didn't do a lot of visual effects.
Yeah,
Every once in a
sure.
while, we'd have maybe 5, 6.
So maybe you
of
spent
them.
most of your time finessing, using trim tools to finesse your edit. That seems like a concept that up-and-comers really have lost the art.
Trim
Oh
tool,
my
trim tool, oh my God. Trim tool is like the best. And like, it's so funny now, because when you guys, I gotta have the bone to pick, because when you guys change up versions like that, and it changes, and then we have to go out to our committee,
To our
on
assistants to
Facebook
say,
and stuff.
find out.
How to do this again.
So 2 more, what I'll try and make it quick questions about the craft and about your experience. First, and you guys really threw me when you said that the episodes are really compartmentalized. Like, I don't know what's going to happen next.
Yeah.
But these characters that you're dealing with there's story arcs, then there's story arcs. They go from hero to anti-hero to, oh, I hate that guy, to, oh, I'm so sympathetic to that character. Did you find it tough, starting off saying, well, I'm sympathetic to Walter and his situation, to now like, wow, he's become out of control? And did it affect how you cut and just your approach to the show, or are you really sort of more with blinders on how you do it?
Well, for me, I just was going with what the film told me. You know, what the footage was telling us and reading the scripts and stuff. I don't think him changing from one person to the next, you know, how dark he got affected my attitude towards him, because we were trying to create this project.
Do you actually even develop an attitude toward the characters? I mean,
I was always on Team Walt, but it didn't really affect how I got the show. You know, I wasn't like just, you know, leaning toward, you know, doing things so he would look good, or, you know what I mean? I was just hoping, you know, I was always hoping that he would, you know, get what he wanted. I don't know. I mean, he was despicable, but I just, that's drama though. That's good drama.
And that's kind of analysis you do after the completed stuff. You don't really do it while you're in it. You're just, you know, you're looking at dailies, you're looking performance.
but you'll get multiple, you know, Cranston will give you multiple performances of a reading, and some are going to be probably a little more like darker or lighter, and
They're all good though.
Yeah.
That's actually the biggest problem. That I found.
The abundance of
editorially.
riches.
So many good things.
Yeah, too many good things. I don't know.
You have to go with one of their directions of the performance and kind of play that through and see if it worked.
Yeah.
And if it didn't, then you start over again.
Because I mean, we would like talk. We would always eat lunch together and stuff, you know, and we would always talk about, you know, what was happening, what we thought. We would speculate just like everybody else would, and you know, stuff. And we'd just be a little bit more ahead of the game, but we didn't know, and we would speculate. And a lot, you know, it was like, yeah, I was still on Team Walt, but there were other people that were just like, what, how, you know. But and we were working on the show.
so now that you've worked on this show, and it's such an iconic show, I know a lot of people would probably take away from this, like every project you work on ever since, you'd have to say, well, you know, when I was on Breaking Bad, so I'm about to win this argument.
You try not to do that.
So what do you take away from this experience working on such an incredible show?
I feel like I basically won the assistant lottery by working on Breaking Bad. I mean, literally, and I'm very, very aware of it, and I acknowledge it all the time. You know, I got lucky. My editor got Breaking Bad as a pilot, and I got my job as an editor before Breaking Bad was even picked up. So we didn't even know it was picked up, and I was like going to do it. So yeah, I won the assistant lottery, flat out, and you know.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't say enough about being involved with the show. It was like, there's nothing like that. I don't know if anything ever will come back quite like Breaking Bad.
And it's not just the show, it's the people. I mean, for me, talk about a weird trajectory. I mean, Vince, like, kind of gave me a blessing of doing a figure skating version of Breaking Bad as one of our, like, mini webisodes. And, like, because, you know, we would always have lunch together. And figure skating is my hobby and probably a sideline career. And they were like, what are you doing next? And I'm like, you know, I'm John McEnroe skating Bjork because it's so quiet or whatever. And I came up with the idea, and that's something that, like, an assistant editor in a cutting room, it's like, it's kind of unprecedented, the creative freedom that Vince really gave
and the
to
approachability.
Everybody.
He's very approachable. I mean, you know, I'm glad you brought that up, Sheridan, because I was going to say, Breaking Bad, I always say this too, Breaking Bad is a place where dreams come true. They really did. I mean, there's so many people who got to do things that they would never normally do, or they got to move into other areas of production or post-production that they wouldn't normally get to do. One of our other assistants, Mel Friedman, pitched to Vince about a webisode where he made a comic book, sort of an animated.
It was from Jane and Jesse's, you know, the cartoon characters that they drew. It's called Team Science.
Yeah.
And that's still on the web.
Yeah, and he just pitched him. I didn't even know about it. He was my assistant at the time. I had even no idea, but he was pitching this to Vince. I found out about you pitching that to Vince later. It was like they just go up to him. He's very approachable. You know, I mean, I pitched to him in season 2. I said, hey, we should do a podcast because, you know, all these other shows were doing podcasts, and I'm like, nobody's doing them. And he's like, I don't know. I don't know. What am I going to say, right? And he did the first one and was like, we got to do this on every episode. Every episode.
He was hooked after that.
Yeah, and then he would pull everybody else into it. I mean, it became a thing. We would go on Saturdays and do like 6 of them, and nobody's getting paid, but everybody wanted to be there.
Be involved.
You know, everybody wanted to do it. And
he sets the tone. I mean, he really sets a tone of what's the word? The
Magnanimous.
no, of working together. Where are my words?
Camaraderie, collaboration.
He really sets the tone of collaboration and gives people the opportunity to prove themselves. It's like you said, you don't get it if you didn't do the work and you didn't do a great job, but he gives you those opportunities to, show what you got at the highest level with the highest, level of material.
Well, also the talent coming in, the directors, just amazing.
Well,
amazing,
it sounds like
right?
really what you guys are, to sum it up, is it's all about working hard to make an opportunity for yourself, and then once you finally get it, you gotta make the most of it. 'Cause
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're just gonna get passed by.
You know
And
what?
appreciate it.
Yeah, but you know what? You also have from the top down. I can't say enough good about Vince Gilligan, because from the top down, he's very, very much about being creative, but you also bringing creativity to it. He wants to hear your ideas. He wants, he may not use them, but he appreciates that you have them. You know what I mean? And most places I find, I think they want you to be creative, but a lot of times they don't really want.
Well, every show, it's always from the top down.
Yeah.
Whatever the top is, good or bad, it trickles down. And Vince is the best.
Yeah.
What I appreciate is that you all got together to make such an incredible show. I appreciate that you all got up early. It's early here for editors especially, but not this one. To come here and talk with us and share with us your experiences on this show. I can't thank you enough, and it was a pleasure having you here. Thanks.
Well, thank you very much.
Avid media composer.
I am this man.